I live in a tech city and I have been surrounded by tech bros for most of my adult life. I worked in tech for over a decade. And this current fascination that so many tech bros have with like hacking their bodies, entering into extreme sports, doing all these weird modifications to live forever is wild to me. I used to get interviewed a lot back in the day about white supremacy, racism, sexism, ableism in tech, because I do have that tech history along with my work that I've been doing for a while now around social issues. And it has always been hilarious to me the amount of people who thought that tech was exempt from a lot of this because they've obviously never been in tech or they've been a white man in tech, because really so much of tech was created as this space for white men who felt entitled to more respect from other white men and more sex from women than they thought they were getting, to get their revenge, to create a space in their own name. It really is the same violence of manifest destiny, just in a new space. So this is connected. It is well known that one of the most powerful tools that colonizers have in order to take over lands, subjugate human beings, and extract labor from them is to first break the connection that indigenous peoples have with their land, right? So whether that's taking people away from their land, taking land away from people, removing water rights, banning self-sufficient agriculture or community sufficient agriculture, destroying traditional agricultural practices, banning religions that worship connection with the earth or find deities within the earth. These practices and so much more, the dumping on Black, Brown, and Indigenous lands that destroys the land. All of this is a powerful tool of violent colonialism. So when we look at manifest destiny, we're looking fundamentally at a violent colonial practice that really reframes relationship to the land as one of domination, and to the people who are connected to the land also as ones of domination. So all that's on the land is yours to control, to mold, to shape to your will, instead of a being that you are a part of or connected to. So in your relationship with the earth is one of domination, one obtained by violence. It can only be maintained by violence. And that's something that we all know, right? And so when we look at this rapid destruction of the earth that colonizers have, when we look at this violence towards the people who have connection to the land, all of this is this kind of fear that if you let up on the violence, then you will lose control, because you are not in relationship with the earth or the earth's peoples. You are in domination over, and that can only be maintained through this especially violent way. So when we look at these tech bros trying to live forever, when we look at what RFK is trying to do, when we look at what all of these MAHA people are doing, what they're actually trying to do is colonize the body, trying to get people to colonize their own bodies, and they're trying to colonize their own bodies. They're trying to break their intrinsic relationship with their bodies and their minds and turn it into something that can be hacked, that can be dominated and extracted from. So there is no longer this diverse array of how to exist in the world. There is one way, there is an ideal way, and you are supposed to force through violence your body and your brain to adhere. And we're actually seeing attempts at laws to make that happen, right? But what this really is another form of colonization to break our intrinsic relationships with the self. And just like with the colonization of the land, things that are obtained by violence can only be maintained by violence. And that violence is internal and external. So it's not only the continued violence that we are expected to actually enact upon ourselves, upon our bodies and our minds to maintain this ideal, but also violence that will be inflicted upon us should we fail to do that job properly. And absolutely all of this, both the colonization of the land, the colonization of our bodies and our minds, and this breaking of our intrinsic relationships with self and with the land, all of this aims to make us more reliant on an oppressive state. And part of what's at the core of this is our definition of survival. When you break people's connection to the land and to each other, what you do is you shrink survival down to this small, weak, fragile thing, and that keeps us scared and desperate. It takes survival from this larger, cohesive thing where survival is collective. Survival isn't just collective in like our neighborhoods, but it is collective across the land, across our species and many species. When you are connected to the earth, when you are connected to all living beings, when you are connected to your neighbors, then what helps your survival becomes different, and what is a threat to you becomes different. And survival becomes this grander, more secure thing if you are working collectively with others. But what capitalism has sought to do, what oppressors and colonizers have sought to do, is to shrink this idea of survival down to this very individual thing. Your survival is how long you as an individual live, and that's it. And when you shrink it, what you see actually is this breaking of the networks that help us survive. And you see this rapid destruction of environment, right? This rapid decline in holistic overall health. And I'm not talking about, these awful white supremacist capitalist measures of health, but I mean well-being of people. You see that all breaking apart because our support systems are broken apart, and survival becomes individual, and it becomes based on privilege and power. One thing that it's important to add here too, that's part of the ableist aspect of this all, and it seems like a contradiction on the surface, right? Like, why would we be talking about making people healthy again while also removing a lot of traditional ways of keeping people healthier, like vaccines and things like that? What's important to understand, right, is this definition of health that these people have, these ideals they have. There is this idea that goes along with manifest destiny, that there are certain people who are made to have access to it and not. And there is this idea that a lot of these safeguards we have in place that can help people live better, regardless of the diversity of bodies or minds, helping people live better. A lot of these things we have in place for that those are wrong, because they actually help people cheat away from this ideal, that people can live without this ideal. And so there is this eugenicist idea that only certain people should have health and longevity, and they should get it in these particular ways, and it should look this particular way, or it's not worthy at all. And so when we're seeing things like the removal of all of these certain vaccines and things like this, right, it's the idea that people with autism will never achieve the ideal. So why would we give them access to the things that would help them live? That other disabled people would not achieve this ideal. So why would we put so much resources towards that? So it is not, when this definition of survival is so small, that it is so individualistic, that you can't see the collective and what everyone brings to the collective and what diversity of peoples brings to the collective, then it becomes this idea that you must achieve this ideal, and those who can't achieve this ideal don't deserve to live. And so it is completely natural that the next step once you colonize the land is to make us colonize our own bodies and our own minds by turning our idea of well-being and survival even further into this individualist thing, where it's not even how our bodies are doing, it's like this definition of health that is completely broken apart from well-being. And so just like these colonized ideas of individual survival with regards to the land and other people will shrink down this idea of life and survival to something really meaningless, and will sacrifice future generations and whole populations of people and other species toward that individualistic idea of survival, so does this individual internalized colonization of the body and mind. It actually takes this whole broad idea of well-being and shrinks it down into numbers, and it actually removes life out of life. And you end up being so afraid of this small death, so afraid of this weak state that you have been put into, that you don't live. Not only are you sacrificing future generations, not only are you sacrificing whole populations, but you're not living while you're living. And as example, look at these dudes. Look at these dudes who are doing this, who are, boxing in these rings and hacking their bodies and eating all these weird things that they hate because it might get them 20 more seconds of life, or it might meet this benchmark of health that's externally defined. What are their hobbies, right? How are they connecting with people? Who loves them, not admires them, not fears them, not have this vague, violent idea of respect for them? Who loves them? Who do they love? When is the last time you heard any of these guys talk about anything that's not about domination and dominating their bodies and living forever? Why? Why? Why do you want to live without living? And I think it's so important to look at this and recognize that that's the goal, to separate us so much, separate us from everything we could care about. So that way, whatever they want to do to increase their power and increase their definition of success, no matter what it costs us, that we'll be down because we won't have anything to fight for. And so it is so vital that we are aware of what's happening here, that we are aware of the danger of this, and that we commit to living fully, and living fully as in living in our connections to ourselves and in our connections with others. I am, of course, afraid of death. I am a human being. I think most of us are afraid of death, but I'm far more afraid of not living. And knowing that I am committed to living as fully as possible and being as connected not only to my body and my mind, but to the earth and to the people and the beings around me as possible, means that I will live longer, even if I were to die tomorrow, than every one of these people seeking to actively, violently colonize themselves.